Hey everybody, it's Doc Frank. I wish you a happy new year 2024. And this episode of the podcast today will address something that many other podcasts will try as well. How to make the best out of 2024. Now that the new year is just 3 days in, I think it's very valid to talk about this and to have a bit of a think. So I will tell you a little bit what my own plans are, what my tips and tricks are to have a good start into the new year and hopefully have this good start lasting all the way through to December, which doesn't really work in most of the cases. So the 1st of January is a logical day, as is the 31st of December for that matter, to make resolutions for the new year. And after only 3 days, I would hope that most of these good resolutions are still valid. The question is, for how long? Now, with regards to the good resolutions for this podcast, my plan was to bring more guests in for conversations because that is the title of the podcast after all. I did have an interview scheduled just before Christmas, which had to be rescheduled, and it's happening later today. Now, the problem is in order to do a proper editing job, I would have to work until deep into the night. And then it's a question whether it would be a proper editing job in the first place. So with a look on presenting you better quality, I will take myself a little bit more time to edit this interview. So it will probably air on 1 week after next week. So in the meantime, I thought I give you a little bit of an insight in my plans for 2024 and hoping that you may take maybe one page or the other out of my book and get some inspiration or some ideas how you can improve your own new year. So one of the things that you normally do at the end of the year, and obviously I did the same after Christmas or between Christmas and New Year's Eve, I had a look at my objectives for 2023. I did read a book at the beginning of last year, which had the title Measure What Matters. I give you the author in the show notes in case you want to look at this. It was a very good book, and I put it into practice by setting up my own OKRs, objectives and key results. And then I forgot about them for a while, or I kept them kind of on the back burner. I remembered them once in a while, and I thought, I don't think I'm quite on track for some of those, quite a lot of those. And when I looked into this with a bit more time at the end of the year, I realized that for some of these objectives and key results, I failed absolutely miserably. Now, for some of these things, the failure had reasons in the outer world, in external circumstances. I addressed it in a previous podcast episodes that I found in the last year more than before that a number of people made promises in order to not keep them. Now, maybe that wasn't their initial intention, but they basically ended up breaking their promises. And I had several objectives that were based on those promises, and they simply didn't eventuate. Now, I could just leave it at the finger pointing and said, it's somebody else's fault, but this is not really how I roll, and it wouldn't help me learning and improving as well, because if all the power sits with other people, then what can I do to improve? Nothing, which is obviously nonsense, and it doesn't help me either. So a much better approach is to look at myself, look in the mirror, and identify what is my share of the shortcomings. Why did I not achieve the results that I wanted to achieve in all of the areas? So one of the reasons for my shortfall was certainly that I had too much on my list. My list of objectives and key results was very impressive, a full A4 page, but it turned out to be simply too much. I mean, it's nothing wrong with having a long list of objectives, but then if not all of them are achieved by the end of the year, I think it's time to cut myself some slack there. And going forward, if I want to have a better quota of achieved objectives, then the list should be only so long that I can actually reasonably achieve it. Second thing, which was kind of related, not only were some of the objectives too many on the list, they were apparently also too big. In some cases, way too big. I had extremely ambitious, outrageously ambitious growth targets for my company, for my business, especially for the training business. And the results, the outcome were not just disappointing, they were shattering. It was really, really bad. And I got not even anywhere close to the targets that I had originally set for myself. So that was obviously a huge disappointment. If you miss your target by, I don't know, by 30, 40, 50%, that's bad enough. But you don't really want to know by how much I missed that one. So I think it's probably a good idea there for the new year to set the targets a little bit more carefully. About a year ago, I was really on that 10x trip that you may have heard promoted by people like Grant Cardone, that if you set your targets, you should set them like 10 times higher because the effort to achieve them is basically the same. And by the way, the effort to achieve them is usually 10 times higher than what you expected it to be. And as it turned out, I was not in a situation, and I was obviously not willing either to really put this 10 times effort in. And maybe it's looks similar to you. There are other things in life. And that leads me to the next problem, which was maybe the biggest of them all. I got distracted. Not just a little bit, I got distracted on a daily basis with stuff that really didn't help me, didn't bring me forward. Some of them were kind of justified, some of those distractions, like, I don't know, reading books and listening to podcasts and watching videos on YouTube that were supposedly educational. But let's face it, with regards to creating results for my business and for my life, it didn't get me any further. They were just distractions. And for that, it was really an ungodly amount of distractions that really kept me away from pursuing my objectives. Overall, the summary for 2023 was quite discouraging. Objectively, I achieved some things that were really quite impressive. I did develop and publish 2 new training courses that are unique in the world. And I spoke about them in my last episode of this podcast. One was the high capacity signaling blueprint. The other one was the high capacity railway mindset. And I also managed to conduct the CBTC World Summit, a virtual conference like there was never anything else like that before. 18 speakers from 13 different countries. Everybody was there, and everybody who participated thought it was a fantastic event. But the number of people that participated was nowhere near what I was hoping for. And I really wondered how that could be, that conferences with only half the speakers and with less focus on CBTC, less international participation. So these conferences seem to have little problem or no problem to get 100, 200, maybe 300 people in the room. And this conference that I did, which I thought was objectively better with more content, only managed to get, I don't know, around 10% or so of that participant number. I found this very, very disappointing, and it nowhere reflected the effort and also the quality that I put into the organization of this event. And quite honestly, that discouraged me quite a bit. So when this was over, I thought, okay, well, that was the last time. I don't do that again. It's just too much effort, nearly 6 months of organization of that. And the outcome for that was relatively small. Now, the good thing was that everybody that participated absolutely loved it. So a lot of the participants were people who knew me before, for example, taking some of my training courses. And they knew that if I promised to deliver something, then I would actually deliver it in a decent quality. So when I say there will be 18 international speakers, they knew that I wouldn't end up with having 7 or 8. I would have 18 speakers at the conference, or at least 16 or 17. I actually managed all 18 to have all 18 at the event, which was quite amazing. I was amazed by it myself. And so everybody who was there thought that was really the best CBTC conference ever. But people who didn't know me, well, they just, in most cases, just didn't buy in. And maybe that was an effect of like being the new kid on the block, being the new conference, still having some doubters. Oh, who knows whether he can pull this off? Sounds too good to be true, so it probably is. All this kind of stuff. But I must say that was quite disappointing. And that was one of the reasons why I fell a bit into a heap after that conference. I really lost my drive, I lost my motivation, I lost my mojo. And unfortunately, that also affected this podcast here. I struggled to go out for more interview partners. The few people that I contacted, some of them pulled out again. So there was this pattern of broken promises again, which further discouraged me. So yeah, things really fell a bit off towards the end of the year. So, and then of course there was my own shortcomings, the distractions that obviously went through the roof during that phase, because once you are demotivated to do some real work, then just watching YouTube seems to be a very nice way to flee, to get out of the situation. And I really binged more often than not in those last 2 or 3 months of the year. So now for 2024, obviously things need to improve because I wasn't happy with myself. I thought I let myself down. I also thought, maybe even worse than that, I let others around me down, family members, you as listeners of the podcast who would have deserved more interviews, good interviews, every week an interview. And I just couldn't deliver this towards the end of the year. And I felt very sorry for that. So there's a lot of reasons to improve for 2024. And the first thing, maybe the first takeaway also for you to make things better in the new year, is to have an absolute intention to improve. So to have a sharp and realistic look at what didn't go perfect in the last year in 2023, and then think about long and hard how to improve this for the new year, and especially how to get to lasting improvements. So it's not just about having the intention, because every New Year's resolution is based on good intentions. I want to improve. I want to do something better than I did in the last year or the years before. But the key thing really is to implement those good intentions on a regular basis every day of the year. So what is needed here really is to making those good intentions and putting them into action a habit that can be done on a daily basis. So the best source, in my view, to learn new habits and to unlearn old ones that weren't so useful is the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. I have it in my home library, so I dug it out and I'm currently rereading it again, because what I like about this book, it contains a lot of tips and tricks, not just how to build good habits that you want to start new, but also how to get rid of old habits that didn't really help you, that you want to get rid of. So, and then applying those tips and tricks to my own specific situation. So one of the things that's really critical for me, for example, is to have enough energy during the day. And my energy levels depend greatly on the amount of sleep that I'm getting. So if I stay up for too long, and then I sleep in the next morning, or maybe I don't sleep in and then I'm tired during the day, and from lunchtime onwards I need to take a nap because I can't function anymore, all this kind of stuff. So I think getting a proper night's sleep on a regular basis is really a very good and important first step for me. So that was the first thing that I wanted to put into practice. Some of you may have seen posts from me on LinkedIn about a year ago where I got into a habit of getting up every morning before 5 a.m. My specific time was 4:44, which I found quite funny at the time. But it was really hard, and I didn't really enjoy it to wake up every morning by the help of an alarm clock. So what I'm trying now is something different. I'm really scheduling the time to go to bed. So in my specific case, that's 9 o'clock in the evening. And then by 5 o'clock in the morning, I should have had about 8 hours of sleep, which should be enough. So if I wake up by myself at 5 o'clock, or maybe even at 4:44, that's fine. If the body needs a bit more sleep, then I sleep a bit more. But normally, if you go to bed at 9 o'clock in the evening, then normally you should be up pretty much at 6 o'clock, 6:30 at the latest, which is still early enough to have a productive day. So that's the first habit that I want to implement, to have lights off every night at 9 o'clock. And so far, after 3 days, touch wood, it has still worked, and I'm pretty determined to stay with this. Now, the other thing that's pretty specific for my situation, and which was really one of the biggest problem for my miss success last year, was the amount of distractions. So just saying I want to reduce the distractions, that doesn't really help very much. You really need to get specific. So in my specific case, most of the distractions really came from the iPad. So from one of my devices that I used most for example, watching YouTube videos and doing some other things as well that distracted me and didn't really help me. So for you, it may be the phone, or I don't know, something else, maybe an Xbox where you play on excessively, something like that. It really is something that you need to look at for yourself. In my case, it clearly was the iPad. And the most of the times where I got vulnerable to distractions was in the evening, which often led to me going to sleep much later than what I wanted, or in the mornings. So I thought the easiest way to do something about that is having a curfew for my iPad. I tried it before. You can have settings on the iPad which basically switch off certain applications at a certain time. But you can change your settings again to switch them back off. So that trick didn't really help much for me. So now I'm trying something else. I put the iPad away. I'm getting it out of my room into a different part of the house at 8 o'clock in the evening, so that the last hour of my day before I really go to sleep, I don't have an iPad, I don't have any electronic devices, and I can just go back to a good old book to do some reading or so. And should I get tired before the hour is up, then, well, I have lights off before 9 o'clock. So I'm getting the iPad into another room, and it's a room where my wife would realize when I get in there to get the iPad back out. So that makes her an accountability partner by default, because if I was, she know what I'm doing. I told her. So that means if I bring the iPad into the other room at 8 o'clock and put it on the charging station, that's fine. But if I go back there and pick it up later during the evening, or if I pick it up in the morning, then she will notice. And then it's clear that not only I cheated myself, but she realizes as well that I was cheating and I was falling back into the old habit. So far, that has been a very strong incentive not to do it and really stick to the curfew. And the effect on the amount of my distractions was really quite spectacular so far. So not only do I have the last hour in the day without distractions, which could have easily become 2 or 3 hours in the past, and also the first couple of hours in the morning are just for me and not for any iPad distractions. So I can now start doing exercise again. I can have my cold shower in the morning. I can maybe try to meditate for a bit. I can read a bit. I can work as well. So I do have access to my work computer in case I really feel creative and want to do some work, some posting, some content creation, working on training courses, whatever. But there's definitely no chance to get distracted by anything happening on the iPad. And YouTube, for example, will not be run on my work computer at all. So, and that's pretty much it for the time being. The only other thing that I'm trying to do once in a while during the day is to become a little bit more conscious and a little bit more intentional. So if I, for example, if I need to take a break, then I just watch myself what I'm doing. Am I just grabbing the iPad and opening up YouTube, or can I do maybe something else that refreshes me? Maybe I can, I don't know, I can go for a short walk or something like that. That's healthier for me and also avoids the distraction. So trying to be a bit more conscious during the day is the only other thing that I'm doing so far. And that's it. That's it. These are the only changes so far. So I didn't overdo it this time with having, I don't know, 6 or 7 new habits that I want to establish. And I'm really curious to see how far this takes me. So if I just reduce the amount of distraction, how productive I can actually become and how much better my life will develop during 2024 compared to last year. I'm sure I will keep you posted on that in a later episode of this podcast. So for now, I'm only 3 days in, so it's probably too early to say something. So far, I'm pretty happy with what I've achieved. But we will see how things develop and whether I can stick to it. I'm optimistic at the moment, but I think everybody is who has made New Year's resolutions on the 1st of January. Now, the second part of this podcast episode is really a bit what my plans are for 2024 professionally. So let's start with this podcast. I'm being quite open here. I got a bit discouraged towards the end of the year because a number of scheduled interviews didn't happen because people changed plans and I couldn't get hold of them and so on. So it was really, really hard in the last few weeks of the year to get interview partners that I wanted to get that would have made good conversations for you guys. And it came to the point where I really questioned the whole thing, where I said, well, is it really worth the effort if the feedback is so poor with regards to interview guests? And the other thing that honestly discouraged me a bit, and that's certainly not your fault because you are watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, but overall, the number of subscriptions, the number of downloads weren't really quite to my expectations. Now, that's probably normal for a new podcast, which is in the first year. So after all, this is a podcast for a niche audience. The rare industry is relatively small in the scheme of everything else happening in the world. And the chances of my content going viral is pretty slim, even though you may find some of these conversations very, very interesting. So the listenership and the audience for this podcast will probably remain rather small. I'm not giving away huge amounts of money or prizes for some silly games or so. So it's nothing in here that really has the potential to make things really viral. And to be honest, I'm not after virality as well. I want to service the railway industry, but this is really where you guys come in and where you can really do me a huge favor by subscribing if you haven't subscribed yet, and by getting others to the podcast as well to listen in, to check for themselves, and hopefully to get them to subscribe as well. You have no idea what this does to my motivation to keep producing this content for you, and you can really help to keep this show running for a longer period of time by doing what I just said: subscribing, downloading episodes, because I do get to see download statistics. If you're not downloading, then you basically don't exist as far as the statistic goes, and that would be pretty sad. And obviously having additional listeners in the future and additional viewers, that would be very helpful as well. It would really make my day and would keep me going with all the motivation that I need. So what else is on the cards with regards to trainings? I do have a bit to do to work off the list for 2023, a number of things that I didn't do last year, but I wanted to do, which I hope I will get to this year. Just one example, I want to take my ETCS training online, the ETCS Kickstarter. I want to create an online version for that, similar to the CBTC Kickstarter. That's one of the big objectives. Where I'm currently at is that I want to massage all the new content from the new baseline 4 of the ETCS standards into that training. So I do need to change quite a bit of the training content, probably the structure of the course as well. For the CBTC Kickstarter, it was a massive change going from the live version to the online version of the training that looks very, very different. And a similar thing is in the way for ETCS, so that will take a while until I get this done. Another thing I'm currently working on is a new training on interoperability. I did have a previous training called Automatic Train Control and Interoperability. So the new training will be called Digital Signaling Interoperability, and it will cover the interoperability between different CBTC products, what can be done there, interoperability in the field of ETCS, which is not clear and straightforward at all, and then also the interoperability between different technologies, how this could possibly be achieved. So it will be a pretty good training course, but of course it requires a lot of work as well. So there are some new trainings in the pipeline. Watch that space. And one other thing I wanted to mention, I did mention that I was a bit disappointed after the last CBTC World Summit, not with the conference itself. That was really awesome, but with the take up of this conference. But maybe it's a good sign for me, having recovered a bit over the Christmas days. I start getting some appetite for doing another run of the CBTC World Summit later this year in 2024, probably in September. I haven't picked the dates yet, so I need to check with a few people with regards to contributions and see how this works. So, but I'm definitely back in being able to imagine that I could have another run. And maybe then we have a similar effect as with the podcast, when you stick to it for a while and you're not just a 1 year wonder, then chances are that the uptake will go up because people realize that this is really a factor in the landscape of podcasts or in the landscape of CBTC conferences. So I'm pretty sure the other conference will have started smaller as well and then have grown over the years. So maybe we will see something similar for the CBTC World Summit, because quite honestly, a conference like this deserves to be watched by a lot more people, not because it's my conference, but simply because it's good. if somebody else would organize a conference like this, a virtual one where I don't need to travel, I would be on there like a fly on you know what. So, with that said, we're coming to the end of this episode, a bit shorter than usual. I hope you got some ideas, some inspiration, some insights out of the planning for 2024, which hopefully will be useful for your own plans, for your own setup of the new year. Um, Hoping that it will be a better year than the last one, and maybe even one of the best years of your life so far. Fingers crossed for that. I wish you all the best, and I shall see you in the coming weeks with new exciting conversations with exciting guests. I'm really looking forward to that, and so will you probably. So thank you very much again. Looking forward to seeing you in the coming episodes. And as usual, until then, keep it simple and bye for now. Hi, this is Doc Frank again. Before you head off, I just wanted to let you know again of the arguably best CBTC conference that has ever been held, the CBTC World Summit 2023, with 18 speakers from 13 different countries. It was a mega event in September this year, and you now have access to the official recording where you can see all the presentations, all the question and answers after the presentations, and even the VIP fireside chats that were exclusively for VIP attendees during the conference. But you can have all of this now lifelong on demand. You can watch it whenever you want, from wherever you want, and how often you want. Don't miss this opportunity and sign up to the best CBTC conference ever on docfranktraining.podia.com/CBTC World Summit 2023. I repeat that, docfranktraining.podia.com/CBTC World Summit 2023. If you want one recommendation from me on CBTC, that is it. The best content of the year by a mile. Don't miss it. Hi, it's Doc Frank again. I hope you liked today's episode. I like to keep it as simple as possible, so I only have one single request for you. If you like this podcast, please tell your friends and colleagues about it. That's all I want, because that's a service that I'm providing to the industry, and I would like as many people as possible to listen to this podcast and learn something from it. So please share, and until next time, keep it simple and bye for now. Thank you for listening.